So today we're taking a break from our usually scheduled program of mathematics and Gnosticism and other esoteric ideas and Hyperionism to discuss a book called Cosmic Consciousness. And the reason why we're going to take a look at this today is because we can find a lot of information that is extremely relevant to Hyperionism, because Hyperionism is all about elevating humanity and the world to the next level, and that entails allowing and bringing humanity to fruition and coming into a new level of consciousness. And so this book is nearly a century old. It was written in 1901 by a psychiatrist named Richard Bucke. And this book outlines what the psychiatrist calls cosmic consciousness, in which he lays out that there are some people who possess a higher form of consciousness, and that eventually the entirety of humanity will evolve into this new form of consciousness, and then a new world will be birthed from it. Now, I want to say that, first of all, Hyperionism is much more developed and goes beyond what's discussed in this book. But I want to take a look at this book because there's a lot that we can still talk about and learn from by looking at this. And another reason why that I want to take a look at it as well is because I think when a lot of people are new to Hyperionism, we talk about stepping into a new level of consciousness. And for a lot of people, I think that that seems really abstract, like a wild idea, some theory that, oh, may or may not be true, and let's see. It's just not very real or concrete for them. But the truth is that this is a very real phenomena, and the most highly developed Hyperions have this higher consciousness right now. It is something that's occurring. So I think by hearing it, different sources talking about it, helps establish it as something very real and concrete for people. And for us, obviously, it's real and concrete, but we want to help others step into this new consciousness as well. So I think that for those who are new, seeing different sources, different viewpoints talking about what we have been talking about and what we are trying to do is extremely important and can be beneficial in making people realize, hey, this is not just some theory, this is happening here and now, and here's what we can do about it, here's how it can be attained, etc. So once again, as I said, our view, our stance, Hyperionism is much more developed, but we can still learn a lot from this very interesting text. I'll be giving my commentary, letting you know how it ties into Hyperionism, etc. It's going to be good. So just go with it and you'll see what I mean. It's going to be an excellent read. And also remember that I will be making my lecture notes available for this for Patreon supporters. So if you want to get access to my lecture notes for this and my other talks, support on Patreon. And let's see, remember that we also will be doing a giveaway for one of my books at the end of this. If you're watching the replay, sorry you missed it. That's why you should be here when I'm live. But enjoy the replay anyway. It's going to be good. So let's begin. So the main thrust of this book, Cosmic Consciousness, written by psychiatrist Richard Bucke, is that he's describing a new level of consciousness that only a few figures in history have achieved. Yet at some point, the entirety of humanity will reach this new level. So let's begin and start to dissect it. Part 1. What is cosmic consciousness? And I'll be describing what cosmic consciousness is in terms of Hyperionism. Because remember, the goal of Hyperionism is to bring humanity to the level that Richard Bucke is describing, but much further. Hyperionism goes well beyond what's discussed in this book, what Richard calls cosmic consciousness. In Hyperionism, our conception of this is much more developed, and we discuss the 3 modes of a higher consciousness: the avatar, monadic, and absolute perspectives, the triadic modes, the triadic perspectives of a higher consciousness. And so that's important to remember but let's continue, and I'll be explaining the differences as we continue. So according to Richard Bucke here, what is cosmic consciousness? The present volume is an attempt to answer this question, but notwithstanding, it seems well to make a short prefatory statement in as plain language as possible, so as to open the door, as it were, for the more elaborate exposition to be attempted in the body of the work. He's going to give, in a nutshell, description. Cosmic consciousness, then, is a higher form of consciousness than that possessed by the ordinary man. And again, this is something I really want to stress here, that people take seriously and not dismiss as something abstract. Cosmic consciousness is a higher form of consciousness than is possessed by ordinary man. This last is called self-consciousness. So cosmic consciousness is above self-consciousness and is that faculty upon which rests all of our life, both subjective and objective, which is not common to us and the higher animals, except that small part of it which is derived from the few individuals who have had the higher consciousness above named. So basically he's saying that cosmic consciousness is a higher form of consciousness than self-consciousness, which is self-awareness. And that all of humanity rests upon self-awareness. Except for a very small part of it, which are the very few individuals who have achieved the higher consciousness that Richard Bucke has called and labeled cosmic consciousness. To make the matter clear, it must be understood that there are three forms or grades of consciousness. Simple consciousness, which is possessed by, say, the upper half of the animal kingdom. By means of this faculty, a dog or a horse is just as conscious of the things about him as a man is. He is also conscious of his own limbs and body, and he knows these are part of himself. So basically what Richard Bucke is describing as simple consciousness, in Hyperionism we would not call that consciousness. This is sentience. So he's basically saying animals are sentient. And, through sentience, an animal is aware of its body, of its limbs, of pain, of sight, of sound. It has sentience. Humans also have sentience. But over and above sentience, which is possessed by man and animals, man has another, which is called self-consciousness. By virtue of this faculty, man is not only sentient or aware of trees and rocks and water and the limbs and his body, but he becomes conscious of himself as a distinct entity apart from all the rest of the universe. So this ability of self-awareness or self-consciousness is differentiating oneself and understanding oneself as an independent entity within the universe. A self, an I, an ego begins to develop. An ego is not a bad thing. It's a very important tool necessary for stepping in to self-awareness and self-consciousness. It is as good as certain that no animal can realize himself in that way. Further, by means of self-consciousness, man, who knows as animal knows, becomes capable of treating his own mental states as objects of consciousness. So what this means is that man develops the ability of metacognition, which is the ability to think about thought, which is the development of conceptual thinking. So you have animals that are simply sentient and aware of their surroundings. Then you have the advent of self-consciousness in humanity, which entails the development of the ego, the understanding that one is an independent entity within an environment and can have its own thoughts as objects of consciousness, which means that you are able to think about thought, self-thinking thought, and begin to develop concepts, conceptualizations. Now, one quick thing that I want to say here This is a little bit of an aside, but please remember that I don't support the bit of a sexist way that this book is written, such as referring to humanity as he, him, and man, or genderist, or whatever, however you want to ascribe it to. Now, keep in mind this book was written in 1901, so it wasn't, unfortunately, that's how they wrote back then. But because I'm reading from this, I don't want you to think that I think that way as well. I would not be doing so. I would be referring things in a gender neutral way. And excuse me for mixing up sex and gender there for a moment. This is live. You know how it goes. But I would refer to this in a gender neutral way, not as he, him, man, etc. But just keep that in mind. This book was written in 1901. Also, remember that we know that there are some animals that can pass the mirror test. So most animals, the vast majority of animals, are most likely only sentient. However, there are most likely a few of the higher animals that have a very rudimentary self-awareness. Those that can pass the mirror test probably have a very rudimentary self-awareness. But nonetheless, they do not have a developed sense of self-awareness like humanity, where they have a rich conceptual language, the ability to construct advanced societies and cities and cultures and things of that nature. So keep that in mind as well. This book was written at a certain time. So the animal is, as it were, immersed in his consciousness, or in Hyperionism we would say mind, or sentience, because that's not how we define consciousness. But continuing, the animal, as it were, immersed in his sentience, as a fish in the sea, he cannot, even in imagination, get outside of it for one moment so as to realize it. But man, by virtue of self-consciousness, can step aside, as it were, from himself and think, yes, that thought that I had about that matter is true. I know it is true, and I know that I know it is true. So here is this hallmark of metacognition, which is thought that's beginning to think about itself. You can know or have knowledge of that. You can know that you know. Animals have no such capacity. They are just immersed in a sentient, sensual experience. And that's not to downplay the importance of animals. Animals are awesome. I love animals. Animals are fantastic. So don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say there's something wrong with animals. It's just that we are all monadic minds that link to certain avatars. And those that have linked to an animal avatar simply have not developed intricate self-awareness, intricate ego, intricate conceptual language. They are, for the most part, at the level of pure sentience, pure experience, rather than self-reflective cognition, thinking about thoughts, planning for the future in any kind of complex or intricate way. The writer has been asked, how do you know that animals can't think in the same manner? Well, the answer is simple and conclusive. There is no evidence that any animal can so think, but if they could, we should know it. So between two creatures living together, such as dogs and horses and humans, it would be the simplest matter in the world to open up communication. Even as it is, diverse as is our psychology, we do, by watching his acts, enter into the dog's mind pretty freely. We see what's going on there. We know that the dog sees and hears, smells, and tastes. We know that he has intelligence, adapts means to ends, and if he was self-conscious, we must have learned it long ago. It also says that he reasons, but this would be unconscious reason rather than conscious reasoning. We have not learned it, and it is as good as certain that no dog, horse, elephant, or ape was ever self-conscious. Now I have to, again, some of the higher apes do exhibit a rudimentary form of self-awareness. Remember, this book was written a while ago. But again, it's not a high level of self-awareness. It's clearly not as developed as humans. But, you know, I think you get the main point. Another thing on man's self-consciousness, self-awareness, is built everything in and about us distinctively human. And the reason why we're taking the time to really see the difference between animals' mental states, which are sentience, and humans' mental states, which are self-consciousness, is because we're going to then describe what Richard calls cosmic consciousness. In Hyperionism, we'll see it's more developed, but we'll see the gap is just as wide. Understanding the difference between sentience and self-consciousness will help us understand the difference between self-consciousness and cosmic consciousness, or in terms of Hyperionism, absolute consciousness. Language is the objective of which self-consciousness is the subjective. Self-consciousness and language, two in one, for they are two halves of the same thing, are the sine qua non of human social life, of manners, of institutions, of industries of all kinds, of all arts, useful and fine. If any animal possessed self-consciousness, it seems certain that it would, upon that master faculty, build, as humans have done, a superstructure of language, of reasoned out customs, industries, art. But no animal has done this, therefore we infer that no animal has self-consciousness. Basically, what Richard is saying here is, look, humans can build all manner of institutions and industry through the medium of conceptual language, and through building this superstructure of language, which goes along with consciousness. Consciousness and conceptual language go hand in hand, because conceptual language see, look, so self-awareness requires self-reference. It's the I becoming aware of itself. It involves self-reference. Creating a conceptual language also requires a form of self-reference, because you are constructing concepts which require you to think about thought. You see how there's self-reference going on there. Thought thinking about itself. And then you can create a superstructure of conceptual language. So you see how self-consciousness, self-awareness all entails this self-reflective ability. And so animals, for the most part, don't have this metacognition of thinking about thoughts in an intricate way. Or, as Richard points out here, if they did so, they would have created a superstructure of conceptual language. They would have customs, industries, art, cities, civilizations. But they don't, because they're just simply haven't developed enough to get there yet. It doesn't mean that they can't experience emotions and pain and pleasures and happiness and sadness. Absolutely they can. They're just not the level of constructing conceptual language, having a true sense of I in the way that humanity does. And we're going to dive into this more fully as we go along. There's a lot of points I want to talk about, but I'm trying to hold back here. So just keep going with me. I have a lot to say about this, but I want to save it for the appropriate time. So, the possession of self-consciousness and language, okay? The possession of self-consciousness and language by humanity creates an enormous gap between him and the highest creature possessing sentience, only sentience. This is really important, okay? So don't just blow past this. This is really important. Self-consciousness and language that humanity possesses is an enormous gap between simple sentience, the ability to experience. Cosmic consciousness is a third form, which is as far above self-consciousness as is that above simple consciousness. So basically, what this implies is that the gap between animals and humanity is as wide as the gap between humanity and those that possess a higher consciousness. This is very important. This higher consciousness is not a subtle difference. Such as a subtle difference is like an intelligent human versus an ignorant human. That's more of a subtle difference. But the attainment of a higher consciousness is not subtle, it's enormous, akin to the gap between sentient animals and self-aware humans. Then we have the gap between self-aware humans and those that have attained a higher consciousness. And our goal in Hyperionism is to bring humanity to the level of a higher consciousness, what we call absolute consciousness. We are literally the next evolutionary step. This is not some kind of hyperbole. It is true. And the most developed Hyperions have reached this level of absolute consciousness. It is extremely difficult to do so. And all of our Hyperion material is there to help you and enable you on this journey to attain this level. So don't feel bad if you have not yet, because it doesn't come all at once. It's a long process. Any of our amazing Hyperions who have attained this will be able to attest to this. It's a long and arduous process to attain this level. It takes time. It's not something that happens instantly in a flash. So I'll be describing this more as well. But it's important to understand this. And some people might think that this sounds very egotistical to say, but it's not about being egotistical or like, oh wow, we are so superior or something like that. It's about just explaining it as clear as possible so that we can change this fucked up world. Because humans are destroying it. We need to step into a higher awareness as a collective so that we can all enter into a beautiful new world together. And if we do not, this world will crash and burn. This world will die. So again, it's not this sort of egotistical thing of, oh, we are... No, it's a matter of fact, and it's a matter of importance, and it's a matter of necessity. Because this world will burn if we don't do something about it. So, it's important to understand. So, here we go. With this form of understanding sentience, Richard calls it simple consciousness, but I'm inserting the word sentience because in Hyperionism, this is what we call sentience. So, with this form, sentience and self-consciousness persist. Okay, so basically they're saying when someone reaches what Richard calls cosmic consciousness, when someone reaches a higher consciousness, they are still sentient and self-aware. Just like a human is still sentient, just like an animal is. A human retains the sentience that an animal has, but goes higher than it. Likewise, a human that then puts in the work to attain a higher consciousness will retain sentience and self-awareness, but also go beyond it. So sentience and self-consciousness persist, but added to them is a new faculty. The prime characteristic of cosmic consciousness is, as its name implies, a consciousness of the cosmos. That is, of the life and order of the universe. I'm going to go into more detail about what this means. I want to read a little bit more, but don't worry, I'm going to expound on this greatly. What these words mean cannot be touched upon here. It's the business of this volume to throw some light upon them. So basically he's saying this is just a summary. We're going to talk a lot more about it, but don't worry, I'm going to talk a lot more about it right now. But just a minute. There are many elements belonging to the cosmic sense besides the central fact just alluded to. That's true. Of these, a few may be mentioned. Along with the consciousness of the cosmos, there occurs an intellectual enlightenment or illumination, which alone would place the individual on a new plane of existence, would make him almost a new member, would make him almost a member of a new species. So do you see how, what's really being emphasized here is the extremity? Because people don't understand how extreme this is. What Richard is saying here is that the attainment of a higher consciousness is so extreme that those who have attained it is almost a member of a new species. So to this added a state of moral exaltation, an indescribable feeling of elevation, elation, and joyousness, and a quickening of the moral sense, which is fully as striking and more important to the individual than is the enhanced intellectual power. With these come what may be called a sense of immortality, a consciousness of eternal life. Not a conviction that he'll have this, but the consciousness that he has it already. You understand that you are immortal. Not a conviction that someday you'll become immortal, but the conviction and the true concrete knowledge that you are immortal here and now. You are an eternal being. Not some like abstract idea or something. No. You know it. Just like an animal knows that it's hungry, and a human can have conceptual thought and be aware of itself, that concrete of knowledge that one is eternal and immortal as an eternal mind. So I have a lot to dissect here. Let me quickly read through more of this, and then we're going to dissect it. So if you have some questions, don't worry, I'm going to go back. We're going to dissect it more. Only a personal experience of it or a prolonged study of people who have it will enable us to realize what it actually is. That is a higher consciousness. But it has seemed to the present writer that to pass, even briefly and imperfectly, instances in which the condition in question has existed would be worthwhile. He expects his work to be useful in two ways. He's referring to himself in the third person. The writer is saying, I expect my work to be useful in two ways. First, in broadening the general view of human life by comprehending in our mental vision this important phase of humanity's evolution, and by enabling us to realize the true status of those who, down to the present, are either exalted by the average self-conscious individual to the rank of gods, or adopting the other extreme, the insane. So basically, these who have attained higher consciousness, regular human beings, will ascribe to them the rank of gods or the insane. And in the second place, the writer of this book hopes to furnish aid in his fellow men in a far more practical and important sense. The view that the writer takes is that our descendants will sooner or later reach, as a race, as a whole, the condition of cosmic consciousness. Just as long ago, our ancestors passed from sentience and animalistic awareness to self-conscious humanity. And see, this is the goal of Hyperionism. What this writer, see, the reason why I want to share this book with you is because what this writer is writing about 100 years ago is what we as Hyperions are doing right now. We are actualizing this consciousness through our own development as the awakening of the great I, of the absolute, of God, and pulling the rest of humanity with us. We are here to do and bring the rest of humanity to that state, to pull them out of simple self-awareness into absolute awareness. The writer believes that this step in evolution is even now being made, happening right now. And he said this 100 years ago. Now, do you see why I'm trying to get across to those who have not reached this level yet, that this level does in fact exist right here and right now, and you can attain it. This is not some abstract idea or theory. No. It's here and now, and it is what this world must acquire if it doesn't want to burn. So the writer believes that this step in evolution is happening right here and right now, since it's clear to him that humans with the faculty in question are becoming more and more common, and also that as a race, or as humanity in general, that's what he means, we are approaching nearer and nearer to that stage of the self-conscious mind from which the transition to the cosmic conscious is effected. He realizes that, granted the necessary heredity, any individual not already beyond the age may enter cosmic consciousness. He knows that intelligent contact, this is important, he knows that intelligent contact with cosmic conscious minds assist self-conscious individuals in the ascent to the higher plane. He therefore hopes by bringing about, or at least facilitating this contact to aid men and women in making the almost infinitely important step in question. So he is saying, how do self-aware individuals reach the level, this next level of consciousness? By coming into contact, by being around minds that have reached that level and are assisting them. Do you see why I wanted to show you that this is what we are doing, and this is what I try to emphasize is so important. This is what we are doing as Hyperions. First of all, it's our goal to provide the knowledge and the information to reach that level, and then to go out and spread that information. You know, this is why I'm constantly saying, go out, tell people, spread these seeds so that the world may bloom. And this is not any kind of egotistical bullshit sort of thing. This is about a necessary step in evolution that must occur. And that we are the pallbearer. We are the ones that must bring humanity to that level before humanity pulls itself to its own destruction. We must build new terra and create a world structured so that we may create a society of the divine. And I just want you guys to really get excited about how you are playing a part in a major moment in history. What was talked about 100 years ago, what's really been talked about throughout ages, we are implementing and actualizing right now. You guys, right now, watching this, not someone else, you. This is what will be written about in history books. So be excited about it. You're taking part in history right now. It's exciting. Get excited about it. So let's, I want to break a lot of things down, okay? Take a sip of water here. So keep in mind, okay? In Hyperionism, we have the three modes when understanding. Remember, our understanding of higher consciousness is much more developed than what's in this book. But I think you can see, again, why I wanted to show this book to you. We can learn a lot from it and make... Anyway, In Hyperionism, we have the three modes: the avatar, the monadic, and the absolute perspectives. Incorporating these, understanding and incorporating these three modes, both intuitively and rationally, is how we attain the highest form of consciousness. And only a few developed Hyperions have really done this fully. Now, remember, this is a process though. So there's various stages. It's not like you're suddenly, instantly, one day, bam, automatically I have the avatar mode, the monadic mode, and the absolute mode all integrated. I understand it completely, both intuitively and rationally. No, that's not going to happen. So it takes time. And so basically, some people, okay, so first of all, the avatar mode is just the understanding of you in a body. And this is the mode that most people operate under. You know, self-aware humans, they have the avatar mode, but that's it. It's not well developed and it's not working in conjunction with the other modes. It's just it by itself cut off. That's the majority of humanity. They operate in that mode. The monadic mode is the understanding that you are an individual eternal mind. You are an eternal individual independent mind that links to an avatar in order to get around in the holos. And that's where the understanding of immortality comes, because you realize that as a mind, not as an avatar, but as a mind, you are eternal and have always existed and always will exist. Then the absolute form of consciousness is where we understand ourselves as a collective and as one. And that is the monadic collective operating together in harmony as one mind, all reality taken together as one. Okay? So you have the absolute, which is the perspective of all of us as one. Then you have the monadic, which is individual. The absolute is the universal. And then you have the monadic, which is the particularization of that universal. Each and every single independent eternal mind, monad. And then the avatar. Now, again, you're not instantly going to get this all at once. Some people might understand the monadic mode first. Like, oh, I get the avatar mode and I get the monadic mode. I get that I'm an eternal mind, but they might not quite grasp the absolute mode yet. And someone else might have an understanding of reality being one, but they won't realize that they're an individual eternal mind. And also, they might have an intuitive understanding of this through stories and metaphors, but they might not rationally understand it, such as through rationalist philosophy and ontological mathematics. So there's a wide range of development. This is a developmental process, and we're all, this is why I'm very looking forward to, at some point, establishing Hyperion universities where we can, really cultivate this consciousness, because it's a long process, right? So again, it's all these different modes, then these modes interacting with each other and being able to understand them rationally and intuitively. Some might only understand it intuitively. Some might only understand it rationally. But to fully grasp it, for it to be fully developed, it must be understood both intuitively and rationally. And you see, then this entails understanding the mirror self. There is a lot to this. But don't get overwhelmed. Don't feel bad. It's going to take time. Just like if you wanted to understand quantum mechanics, you're not going to understand it from a 30-minute video or something like that. It's going to take time. You have to understand physics as well. Anything. Even if you want to be a great painter, if you want to be great, you're not just going to be it overnight. So don't worry. It takes time. But this is an integrated process. And you can see, just like self-awareness is a certain mode, having the monadic mode and the absolute mode, these are their own forms of awareness, and they all interact with each other. Just like self-awareness interacts with sentience. You're aware of yourself, but you're also sentient. Ow, you prick your finger. You have a sentient qualitative experience that interacts with your self-awareness. So your monadic awareness and your absolute awareness will all be interacting in these different modes and complementing each other and working together in a healthy way if one understands it properly. So just like self-awareness and sentience interact, so does self-awareness, or what we would call the avatar mode, interacts with monadic awareness and absolute awareness. These are all different forms of awareness, all interacting with each other. And so I want to try and make all my points here within a reasonable amount of time. But one quick thing. So the hallmark of being self-aware, right? Just regular self-awareness. I'm not going to go into super detail, but in a nutshell, what one does is they create a simulated version of themselves. This is what Julian Jaynes calls an analog I. It's a simulated version of themselves that they can place in simulated scenarios. Here's an example. Let's say you're imagining going to work next week, and you're imagining quitting your job. What you're going to do is imagine an imaginary version of yourself in that situation, and you'll run simulations. Well, what happens if I give my boss a letter of resignation and I'm really nice to him? You'll run a simulation. Well, what happens if I don't do that? What if it happens if I give him the middle finger and tell him to fuck off? See, you're putting an imaginary version of yourself in an imaginary scenario and running simulations to see what would happen. So you have created what Julian Jaynes calls an analog I, a version of yourself that you place in different scenarios, run simulations, etc. So in this book, what Richard Bucke is calling cosmic consciousness is only one aspect of a fully developed higher consciousness, a fully developed Hyperion consciousness. In my book, The Metaphorical Suicide, I describe this as the analog all. So in self-awareness, you create an analog I, where you have a simulated version of yourself. An analog all is when you have an awareness of all reality. You understand what reality is as an interconnected system, and just like you can run scenarios with an analog I, you can run scenarios with the analog all, taking into account all of reality, where it's been, where it's going, how it affects the collective. Remember, this is only one aspect, and this is an aspect of absolute awareness. Remember, we have these different modes. The avatar mode, which is self-awareness, and the analog I. The monadic mode, which entails you as an eternal mind. And the absolute mode, which will entail, for one aspect of it, as cultivating an analog I, an analog all, which is a simulated version of all reality. Understanding how all reality works, interconnects. And then, this is how one is able to create societies based on how it will affect all reality. Just like a self-conscious person makes choices based on their analog I. Oh, I put myself in this future scenario, I see how it's going to affect me, and so I will choose that option rather than this option. Someone with a highly developed higher consciousness will have an analog all and know how decisions will affect all reality, and therefore can construct societies, cultures, structures with regard to not just themselves, but the collective in mind. Now, do you see why it's so important in New Terra for those in leadership positions to have cultivated this higher consciousness so that they can make choices via an understanding of reality, having developed an analog all, and not just selfish choices? Look at our leaders today. Look at people in positions in power. What are they doing? What choices are they making? Do they have the good of the collective in mind? Hardly. even the most benevolent of them, is just a fraction of someone who has developed an analog all and is taking into a teleological striving to actualizing the divinity of every single citizen. And that's our goal. We want to create a society where we can raise humanity up. We want everyone to be the best. Now, there are some assholes who have they just want to be like, oh, we're so much higher than everyone, and they want to lord over others. That's not us. We don't want to be like, oh, haha, we are of a higher consciousness, and look at these plebes. No, that's bullshit. This is old world order mentality. In a Hyperion new world, in New Terra, our goal is to we want everyone to be the best they can possibly be. We want a vibrant new world. We don't want a world of masters and slaves. That's disgusting. We want a divine world where everyone is actualizing themselves. And that brings me to my next point, because guess what? If you don't, it becomes a lonely experience. Because I want to emphasize here that Richard is saying in this that often what comes with this is a feeling of elation and joy, and that can happen, but I want to emphasize that that's not necessarily always the case. It's not necessarily, now it can happen, absolutely. You can be like, oh wow, reality is so intricate and it's amazing, etc. So you can feel joyous and elated, but if you don't feel like there's something wrong with you, that's not always the case. And actually, contradictory to what Richard says, the opposite can actually occur where one can feel a sense of depression and isolation. Why is that? Because the world is so disconnected and disjointed. When you develop that analog all, you realize how far and fractured humanity is and what poor choices they're making and how disjointed everything is. And you also yearn for a community and a culture, because when you reach a higher consciousness, you want others. You want to create a collective. You seek out others because you're not just you're not just self-aware, you're all aware. So it's not just I. You keep the I. I is important. There's nothing wrong with I. It's not about destroying the ego. You keep self-consciousness just like you keep sentience. You want it. That's important. But you also develop the all, and you want to create and nourish a collective. And that is what Hyperionism is doing. We are creating and establishing that collective here and now. And that's why it's also super important, because those who attain a higher consciousness can feel isolated and depressed. And we want to create that community. We want to have that community so that one doesn't feel so isolated. And now, there's a place where there are others like me. Imagine if the world were just full of animals and that's it. And then you suddenly become self-conscious, self-aware, but none of the other creatures are. They're just instinctual and sentient. You'd feel pretty damn isolated, wouldn't you? It'd be pretty damn isolating. You'd want another self-consciousness. Now, remember, this is just an example, all right? This is just an example. So don't take that too literally. But that's just an example. But this is the state of those who are scattered throughout the world that have begun to have some grasp of an analog all, wanting to come together and create that new society and have that culture and have that being able to develop and construct with others. Because we are world constructors. We are world shapers. That's what we are. And we yearn and desire for that. By the way, if you are interested in understanding more about the analog all, I recommend my book, The Metaphorical Suicide. It talks all about what we're talking about right now. Highly recommend it. Okay? I mean, I know I'm not trying to do like a plug. Well, I mean, I kind of am, but I'm not doing it. It's just, I'm not trying to do it. You know what I mean. Just read the thing. It's helpful, okay? Anyway. So the other thing that I want to point out here, I'm looking at my notes. The other thing that I want to point out here is that we want to raise humanity up with us. And remember, not all humanity is going to automatically, remember, this is a process. So it's going to be a big learning curve. And so it's difficult, and many people won't fully understand in a rational way. but we want to at least begin their growth by watering the seeds so that they can sprout and they'll be on their way. And they might not rationally understand it at first. First, it might need to be communicated intuitively through stories and metaphors and things like that. That's why if you notice in my videos, some of my videos are through metaphors and stories, like when we talk about Gnosticism. Some of my videos are about the mathematics, when we talk about ontological mathematics. It's because everyone understands in a different way, and will understand in a different way depending on their level of development. And so we want to help people. We want to bring people up. We don't want to lord over them. We don't want to look down upon them. We want to look at ourselves like teachers who really desire to bring their students to the level of teacher themselves. Right? We don't want to, that's the greatest desire. Not to always be like, oh, I'm always going to be above you. We want to bring everyone up so we're all in a society of the divine. And that's so important, okay? Because I know that a lot of people can get really egotistical about this and start looking down on people. That's not the way to do that. We are the trailblazers to a new world, and we are helping. That's what a true illuminator does. All right? That's the truth of an illuminator, as guides to a new world. All right? This is why in Greek, illuminator is phoster. Guiding lights to build a new world. Not to create some master slave. That's an archon. Not archons, but illuminators, bringing light to a new world. Now, I've gone on quite a bit here. I always do much longer than I anticipate, but we are going to continue reading this more next week because there's actually a lot more that I want to talk about that I haven't gotten to. But I hope that this has given you a taste of what it means. And I hope that you are getting excited about taking part in a world historic transition, being a part of it, working on yourself, and then helping us as well to bring humanity into that new phase. Because right now humanity is dragging itself down. We need to pull them up. This is why it is critical for us to construct a beautiful new world, that citadel on the hill, New Terra. I'm going to give a big shout out to those who support on Patreon and our top supporters, Kure Kumo, Timothy, Rex, Naruda, Rupfu, Renaissance Fairy, and all our top supporters. You guys are awesome. If you want to support my work, consider supporting on Patreon. You'll get access to a lot of my lecture notes, including the lecture notes for this video, many of my other ones, and access to our weekly secret live streams. Patreon's the best way to support my work because of all the censorship that occurs on social media platforms such as Facebook and YouTube, and it means a lot to me.